"What was that?" she sputtered, looking around wildly. I casually stepped outside, feigning concern. "Oh dear, Karen," I said, my voice dripping with false innocence. "Did you get wet? I just installed a new sprinkler system. I had no idea it was on—" Karen glared at me, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. You did this on purpose," she accused. "On purpose?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "Why would I do that? I'm just trying to keep my lawn green. You know, community standards and all that." Karen stormed off, muttering something about inconsiderate neighbors and unnecessary water usage. But that was just the beginning. I'm a pretty simple guy. I like my coffee strong, my weekends long, and my neighbors at a reasonable distance. I live in Sunnyside Gardens, a neighborhood that on the surface seems idyllic. Rows of neat houses, manicured lawns, the occasional friendly wave. But like any seemingly perfect community, there's always something lurking beneath the surface. In our case, it was the HOA, and, more specifically, one particular member of the HOA, Karen. I'd had a minor run-in with the association before, a misplaced recycling bin that resulted in a sternly worded letter and a threatened fine. But that was nothing compared to what was coming. I'm a gardener. Not a professional, mind you, but I enjoy spending time outdoors, tending to my plants, and generally making my little patch of Sunnyside Gardens a bit more colorful. Little did I know, my passion for petunias would become the focus of Karen's attention. It started subtly. I'd be out in my garden, weeding or planting, and I'd catch her staring. Not just a casual glance, but a full-on, unwavering stare, as if she were trying to memorize every blade of grass, every petal, every gnome. "Lovely day, isn't it, Tom?" she'd say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It is, Karen," I'd reply, trying to sound polite. "Those petunias are interesting," she'd continue, her eyes narrowing. "Are you sure that's the right color for this neighborhood?" "They're purple, Karen," I'd say, confused. "They're flowers." She'd hum, unconvinced. Perhaps a nice uniform white would be more appropriate? Then there were the questions. Endless, intrusive questions. "What kind of fertilizer are you using, Tom?" "Are you sure you're watering enough? Or too much?" "Have you considered replacing those rustic stepping stones with something more modern?" And, of course, the unsolicited advice. "You know, Tom, you really should prune those rose bushes back. They're looking a bit wild." They weren't. "I've found that marigolds are much more effective at deterring pests than whatever that is." It was lavender. It smelled lovely. "Have you thought about adding a water feature? A small, tasteful water feature, of course. Nothing excessive." It was exhausting, but it got worse, much worse. The subtle glances turned into blatant peering. I'd catch her staring through my kitchen window while I was making dinner. I'd find her inspecting my trash cans on garbage day. "Just making sure you're recycling properly, Tom." And then there were the anonymous tips that started arriving in my mailbox. "A concerned resident has reported that your garden gnome is exceeding the maximum height limit by half an inch. It has come to our attention that your bird feeder is attracting undesirable wildlife." Squirrels. It was attracting squirrels. "Please be advised that your choice of wind chimes is considered to be disruptive to the neighborhood peace." I knew it was Karen. Who else would care about the height of a garden gnome? I tried everything to deter her. I put up "no trespassing" signs. She ignored them. I tried to have a friendly conversation, explaining that I appreciated her concern, but that I was perfectly capable of managing my own yard. She turned it into a lecture about HOA rules and the importance of maintaining Community standards. I even planted a row of tall, dense hedges along the property line. She just started peering over them, using a small stepladder she'd apparently acquired for just such an occasion. One time I found her using binoculars. Binoculars! The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon. I was hosting a small surprise birthday party for my wife, Sarah. We had friends and family gathered in the backyard, enjoying the sunshine, the food, and the company. I had just brought out the cake, candles lit, when... "Surprise!" Karen yelled, bursting through the gate, her eyes wide with something. Excitement? Intrusion? A combination of both, I think. Everyone froze. Sarah's jaw dropped. The cake, thankfully, remained upright. "Karen," I said, my voice tight. "What are you doing?" "Oh, I just saw all the cars," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "And I thought I'd pop over and see what was going on. Is it a party? How festive." Her eyes scanned the decorations, the food, the guests, as if searching for some kind of violation. "It's a private party, Karen," I said, emphasizing the word private. "Oh, I know, dear," she said, patting my arm condescendingly. "But I just wanted to make sure everything was in order. You know, noise levels, proper disposal of trash, that sort of thing." She then proceeded to inspect the buffet table, offering unsolicited comments on the food. "Too much sugar, dear. The decorations. Rather colorful, aren't they? And the guest list. Do you know all these people, Tom?" The party was ruined. Sarah was furious. My friends were bewildered. And I was done. Karen had crossed the line. She'd invaded my privacy, disrupted my life, and ruined my wife's birthday party. It was time for action. It was time for revenge. Enough was enough. I'd tried being polite. I'd tried being reasonable. I'd tried hedges, signs, and even direct conversation. But Karen was like a heat-seeking missile of nosiness, and I was her primary target. My frustration had reached a boiling point. I needed a solution, a permanent solution, a solution that would send a clear message. Stay out of my yard. I paced my living room, racking my brain. A fence? Too obvious. A moat? Tempting but impractical. A pack of guard dogs? Ethically questionable. And then it hit me, like a blast of cold water to the face. A motion-activated sprinkler. Not just any sprinkler, mind you. A high-powered, strategically placed, multi-zone sprinkler system designed to, well, let's just say it wouldn't be watering the lawn. The image of Karen, caught in the crossfire of perfectly calibrated sprinkler heads, her impeccable outfit soaked, her perfectly coiffed hair plastered to her face, brought a smile to my lips. It was beautiful. It was glorious. It was revenge. This wasn't just about watering the grass. It was about establishing boundaries. It was about reclaiming my privacy. It was about sweet, sweet, watery justice. I spent the next few hours online, researching sprinkler systems. I wasn't messing around. I wanted the best, the most powerful, the most Karen-proof. I finally settled on a system that boasted rotor heads with adjustable spray patterns, high-pressure nozzles, and guaranteed to soak even the nosiest of neighbors. Okay, it didn't actually say that last part, but it was implied. It had multiple zones, allowing me to customize the watering schedule and target specific areas. It was, in short, the Cadillac of sprinklers. The installation was an adventure. I enlisted the help of my friend, Mark, who had a knack for DIY projects and a healthy appreciation for a good prank. We spent the better part of a Saturday digging trenches, laying pipes, and strategically positioning the sprinkler heads. We placed them along the property line, near my windows, in the flower beds Karen frequented, and, of course, right next to the gate where she'd so rudely interrupted Sarah's birthday party. There were a few minor mishaps. Mark accidentally triggered one of the sprinklers, soaking himself from head to toe. I managed to get tangled in a roll of irrigation tubing, looking like a mummy wrapped in black plastic. But overall, the installation went smoothly. The final step was testing the system. We calibrated the motion sensors, adjusted the spray patterns, and fine-tuned the timing. It was like preparing for a military operation, except instead of weapons, we were wielding water. The first soaking was magical. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was inside, working from home, when I heard a familiar, high-pitched shriek coming from my backyard. I peeked through the blinds, a grin spreading across my face. There was Karen, standing near my rose bushes, of course, her pristine white pantsuit now thoroughly soaked. She looked like a drowned rat, a very angry, very wet, drowned rat. "What was that?" she sputtered, looking around wildly. I casually stepped outside, feigning concern. "Oh dear, Karen," I said, my voice dripping with false innocence. "Did you get wet? I just installed a new sprinkler system. I had no idea it was on—" Karen glared at me, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. You did this on purpose," she accused. "On purpose?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "Why would I do that? I'm just trying to keep my lawn green. You know, community standards and all that." Karen stormed off, muttering something about inconsiderate neighbors and unnecessary water usage. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Karen got accidentally soaked multiple times. Each encounter was more elaborate and humorous than the last. One morning she was inspecting my trash cans, again, when a sprinkler head popped up and blasted her with a jet of cold water right in the face. Another time, she was peering through my kitchen window when a strategically placed rotor head sent a cascade of water cascading down on her, soaking her perfectly coiffed hair. I even managed to catch her on camera, bringing along another HOA member, Mrs. Henderson, a known stickler for rules, on one of her inspection tours. They both got drenched, their expressions of outrage a priceless masterpiece of slapstick comedy. The visual of Karen, repeatedly soaked, sputtering, and furious, was a constant source of amusement. I'd watch the security camera footage, rewinding and replaying the best moments, chuckling to myself. It was petty, perhaps, but it was so satisfying. Karen, of course, was not amused. She complained to the HOA, demanding that I remove the sprinklers. She claimed they were a safety hazard, that they were wasting water, and that they were creating a general nuisance. She even tried to claim that one of the sprinklers had attacked her. She tried to sabotage the system. I'd find the motion sensors covered with tape, the sprinkler heads twisted in odd directions, even the water supply to my house mysteriously turned off one afternoon. But I was always one step ahead. I installed protective covers over the sensors. I added more cameras. I even invested in a backup water tank just in case. One particularly memorable confrontation took place on a sunny Saturday morning. I was out in my garden, tending to my, now perfectly watered, petunias, when Karen stormed up my driveway, her face a mask of fury. "This has to stop, Tom!" she yelled, her voice echoing through the neighborhood. "These sprinklers are a menace. They're weapons of mass irrigation." "They're sprinklers, Karen," I said calmly. "They're for watering my lawn. You know, keeping it green. Community standards." "You're doing this on purpose," she accused, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You're trying to drown me." "I'm trying to water my petunias, Karen," I said with a shrug. "Perhaps if you stayed on your own property, you wouldn't get wet." "I have a right to inspect," she sputtered. "Inspect what?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "My flowers, my gnomes, my perfectly compliant lawn?" Karen opened her mouth to retort, but at that moment a sprinkler head popped up from the ground and blasted her with a jet of cold water, directly in the face. She shrieked, sputtering and wiping the water from her eyes. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Karen, soaked and defeated, turned and stormed off, muttering something about lawyers and lawsuits. She tried to rally the other neighbors to her cause, but most of them were either secretly amused by the whole situation or terrified of getting caught in the crossfire of my sprinkler system. Karen's reign of terror, it seemed, was coming to an end. One perfectly timed sprinkler blast at a time. Let's bring on the deluge. Here's Part 3, Sprinkler Showdown. Part 3, Sprinkler Showdown. The inevitable HOA meeting arrived with all the subtlety of a fire alarm. Karen, still damp from her latest accidental soaking, she'd tried to approach my house under the cover of darkness, wearing a camouflage poncho. It didn't work, was in rare form. "These sprinklers," she declared, her voice echoing through the Sunnyside Gardens Community Center, "are a menace. They're a safety hazard. They're weapons of aquatic aggression." "They're sprinklers, Karen," I said, calmly addressing the board. "They're designed to water my lawn, which, I might add, is looking exceptionally green thanks to the consistent watering." "He's doing it on purpose!" Karen shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He's targeting me. He's a water terrorist." I raised an eyebrow. "A water terrorist? Really, Karen? That's the best you've got?" I then proceeded to lay out my defense. I pointed out that the sprinklers were entirely on my property. I explained that they were, in fact, for watering my lawn. A perfectly legitimate use of sprinklers, I argued. And most importantly, I highlighted the fact that there were no HOA rules against motion-activated sprinklers. "I'm simply trying to maintain my property," I said with a shrug. "And, deter wildlife." I even offered a demonstration. I'd brought along a small potted plant and one of my sprinkler heads, disconnected from the main system, of course. I placed the plant on the table and, with a dramatic flourish, waved my hand in front of it. The sprinkler head popped up and delivered a brief, targeted burst of water. "See?" I said. "Perfectly harmless, unless, of course, you happen to be a particularly nosy weed." A few of the board members chuckled. Even Karen's usual allies were looking distinctly uncomfortable. Then, Mrs. Henderson, the woman who'd been soaked along with Karen during their ill-fated inspection tour, spoke up. "I have to say," she said, adjusting her, now water-stained glasses, "I've always had trouble with dry patches on my lawn. Perhaps Mr. Miller's system could be beneficial." Karen shot her a look of pure, unadulterated betrayal, and then Mr. Henderson, a different one, thankfully, a retired lawyer who lived down the street, cleared his throat. "Karen," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I think you're on shaky ground here. Mr. Miller is within his rights to install sprinklers on his property, and frankly, if the HOA tries to interfere, we could be facing a lawsuit for harassment, invasion of privacy, possibly even water damage." The meeting ended in a stalemate. Karen, fuming and defeated, but thankfully dry, stormed out of the room. I, on the other hand, left feeling victorious. For now. But the war, as they say, was far from over. What followed was a period of escalating absurdity that I can only describe as the Great Sprinkler War of Sunnyside Gardens. Karen, obsessed with proving her point, and, I suspect, with getting revenge, tried every tactic she could think of to avoid the sprinklers. She started wearing a raincoat and carrying an umbrella, even on perfectly sunny days. She'd approach my house hunched over, crawling on her hands and knees like some kind of deranged commando. She even invested in a periscope, which she'd use to peer over my fence, her face a mask of furious concentration. And I, of course, responded in kind. I added more sprinklers. I adjusted the timing and spray patterns, creating a complex, ever-changing web of watery obstacles. I even added a random soak mode, which would activate the sprinklers at unpredictable intervals, just to keep things interesting. It was a glorious, ridiculous spectacle. One afternoon, I watched from my window as Karen, wearing a full-body rain suit and carrying a large, camouflage-patterned umbrella, attempted to sneak up to my mailbox. She moved with the stealth of a particularly clumsy ninja, inching forward, pausing, listening intently. And then, whoosh! A sprinkler head popped up from behind a rose bush and blasted her with a jet of cold water. She shrieked, dropped the umbrella, and scrambled back, her rain suit plastered to her body. Another time I saw her trying to use the periscope to spy on my backyard. As she peered through the lens, a sprinkler head, strategically positioned on my roof, activated, sending a cascade of water directly down onto the periscope, soaking her from head to toe. I even caught her on camera, attempting to cover one of the motion sensors with a plastic bag. As she reached out, a sprinkler hidden in a nearby flower bed activated, drenching her with a perfectly timed burst of water. It was a constant, hilarious game of cat and mouse, except the cat was a middle-aged man with a sprinkler system, and the mouse was a perpetually furious, perpetually damp HOA busybody. The final confrontation came on a hot summer afternoon. I was inside, enjoying a glass of iced tea, when I heard a loud thwack, followed by a series of increasingly frantic yells. I rushed outside, and my security cameras captured the entire glorious scene. Karen, driven to the brink of madness by weeks of accidental soakings, had decided to take matters into her own hands. She was in my yard, armed with a shovel, attempting to dig up one of my sprinkler heads. "I'll show you!" she shrieked, hacking at the ground with the shovel. "I'll deactivate your infernal water weapons!" But Karen, in her blind rage, had forgotten one crucial detail. The sprinklers were motion-activated. As she raised the shovel for another blow, she stepped directly into the path of another sprinkler. And another. And another. In a matter of seconds, she had accidentally triggered every single sprinkler in my yard. The result was spectacular. Dozens of sprinkler heads popped up, sending jets of water arcing through the air, creating a massive, chaotic, watery ballet. Karen, caught in the crossfire, was drenched from head to toe. She screamed, she flailed, she slipped in the mud, and she ended up sprawled on my lawn, looking like a drowned, defeated, and utterly humiliated rat. The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered on their lawns, watching the spectacle with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Even the HOA board members, who had arrived to mediate the situation, were struggling to suppress their laughter. It was over. Karen, completely and utterly defeated, retreated from my yard, leaving a trail of muddy footprints and soaking wet clothes in her wake. The great sprinkler war of Sunnyside Gardens had come to an end, and I, Tom, the accidental water warrior, had emerged victorious. A year has passed since the legendary sprinkler showdown, the day Karen Whitmore learned that messing with a man's yard is a dangerous game. And, I must say, life in Sunnyside Gardens has been considerably more peaceful. My victory, it seems, had a ripple effect. The sprinklers? Oh, they're still there, every single one of them. Strategically positioned, meticulously calibrated, and still occasionally accidentally soaking anyone who ventures too close to my property line. It's not intentional, of course, just a quirk of the system. A very, very convenient quirk. I've even added a few new features: a mist setting for those extra hot days, a rainbow mode that projects colored lights onto the water spray, and my personal favorite, a random soak setting that activates the sprinklers at unpredictable intervals, just to keep things interesting. Karen? She's gone. Vanished. Sold her house. resigned from the HOA, in disgrace I might add, and, rumor has it, moved to a community with no gardens, no sprinklers, and presumably no nosy neighbors. I heard she's seeking therapy. I sincerely hope it helps. The neighborhood as a whole seems to have learned a valuable lesson. Respect property lines. Respect personal space. And most importantly, never underestimate the power of a well-placed sprinkler system. There's a newfound sense of caution in the air. People are more polite, more considerate, and definitely more aware of their surroundings, especially when walking past my house. A new family moved into Karen's old place a few months ago. The new neighbor, a young man named Alex, stopped by one afternoon while I was out testing my sprinkler system. It's important to perform regular maintenance, you see. "So," Alex said, gesturing towards the array of sprinkler heads strategically positioned around my yard. "Why do you have so many sprinklers?" I grinned, adjusting the nozzle on one of the rotor heads. "Oh," I said casually, "just an HOA misunderstanding." Alex blinked. "A misunderstanding?" "Yeah," I said, nodding. "Long story. Involves a nosy neighbor, a power-hungry HOA, and a whole lot of water. Let's just say things got a little wet." Alex chuckled, shaking his head. "Well," he said, "I'll definitely keep that in mind." "Good idea," I said with a wink. "And if you ever need any advice on yard maintenance, you know where to find me." And as I stood there in my perfectly watered yard, surrounded by my strategically placed sprinklers, a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass, and the lingering memory of Karen's soaked outrage, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I'd fought the good fight. I'd defended my territory. And I'd won. The HOA was still around, of course, but they were different. More subdued, more cautious, and definitely less likely to mess with my yard. But just in case, I've been brainstorming some new deterrents. Maybe a motion-activated sound system that plays recordings of barking dogs. Or perhaps some strategically placed mirrors that reflect the sunlight directly into certain windows. The possibilities are endless. And as long as there are nosy neighbors and power-hungry HOAs, I'll be ready. Armed with my sprinklers, my security cameras, and a healthy dose of mischievous ingenuity. Bring on the next challenge. I'm prepared.